Sometimes I wonder about my life, mused Kathleen Kelly, the character played by Meg Ryan in the movie You've Got Mail. I lead a small life. Well, not small, but valuable. And sometimes I wonder, do I do it because I like it or because I haven't been brave? So much of what I see reminds me of something I read in a book. When shouldn't it be the other way around? I don't really want an answer. I just want to send this cosmic question out into the void. So good night, dear void. I find myself wondering the same thing at times, especially late at night when I'm tired and pensive, or other times in the aftermath of the disappointments I've experienced, as we all have. At such times, I too ask myself if the choices I've made were driven by what I really wanted, or because I lacked the courage to do something else. Have I been as adventurous as I could have been? Have I taken the risks that I should have? Have I sought to be my best self, or simply coasted along in safety? My career didn't take me to faraway places, at least not longer than a weekend or two. And yet I've managed to build a rather successful and satisfactory career here in Winnipeg, 2 miles from where I grew up, something that is almost unheard of in the Unitarian Universalist ministry, especially outside of New England. It's easy to flatter myself for my prudence and my modest achievements without asking whether I might have used my gifts better. What do you want to be when you grow up? May be the most commonly asked question of children once they reach the age at which they're capable of imagining themselves as adults. I still wonder. I wonder when I'm going to grow up. And I wonder what I might yet still be. We're fond of asserting that our children can grow up to be anything they want to be, even though we know that isn't true. And we tend to pair that with our own quiet confidence that our children are somehow exceptional, that they each have some unique gift or capacity by which they stand out from among their peers. Our own hunger to be extraordinary in some way or another is something we naturally project onto our children and grandchildren, our nieces and nephews, or any child with whom we feel a special connection. The frustrated hockey player aspires for a hockey player in the next generation, as does the frustrated actor aspire for a thespian of great renown, or a pretty good musician hope for a concert pianist. We say that our children are our future, and for this very reason, our hope rests on their shoulders, which is a rather unfair burden to place upon them. But as the poet William Martin cautions us, do not ask your children to strive for extraordinary lives. Help them instead to find the wonder and the marvel of an ordinary life. When I was young, I had big plans, big plans for life, the bigliest of big plans, if you will. I dreamed of fame and fortune, encouraged to do so by well-meaning adults around me, especially good teachers and fine neighbors, and a few mentors along the way. Of course, I was also influenced by the myths of opportunity and achievement that abound in our relatively prosperous society. The world is our oyster. We really believe it. And my natural ambition was reinforced by the ideas of thinkers like our own Henry David Thoreau, who, notwithstanding his sojourn by the woods, where he sought to evade company and be left alone, he admonished people to aim high. In the long run, he wrote, men only hit what they aim at. Therefore, though they might fail immediately, they had better aim at something high. And as we all know from our experience in this world, women need to aim even higher to compete. So my youthful aspirations led me to strive to be extraordinary, even though I was a very ordinary little boy. And despite my mother's frequent reassurances that I was neither better nor worse than any other children, though I may have been different. And by different, I was never sure whether she meant unique or peculiar. In conveying this wisdom, she usually invoked her own father as the source, a man I never knew, which tempered any sting of this egalitarian reminder of my ordinariness. My grandfather was as ordinary a man as they come, and my mother idolized him. She cherished every moment she had spent with him, and her only regret was that he only lived to see one of his grandchildren come into the world. But this reminder of my being, well, pretty solidly average didn't stop me from dreaming about wealth, fame, and power, the outward manifestations of success. But it did cause me to break out in occasional bouts of humility. Both of my parents knew that wealth could be lost more easily than it was gained. Fame could be as shallow as a wading pool left to evaporate. And power could be corrupting. Oh, how corrupting it could be. They valued character and relationships, and they were mostly indifferent towards outward signs of success, and thoroughly unimpressed by people who overestimated their own importance. Don't get me wrong. They weren't opposed to wealth, to fame, or to power in and of themselves. They were simply unimpressed by them if those who possessed them weren't people of good character. And they were equally unimpressed by ordinary people who fancied themselves extraordinary. Check the evidence, they would say to themselves. So I've never been quite certain where my inflated childhood expectations came from. It certainly wasn't from my parents. They followed William Martin's advice without ever having read it. The grand plans of my youth did not come to fruition. I am not a Dalhousie-educated lawyer and successful politician. I never made it to law school, and try as I may, I never made it into public office. Whatever aspirations for fame and fortune I may have once had have not materialized. And yet I am content with what I have achieved. For good fortune that I could not have possibly planned for or even imagined has met me along life's journey. And I'm more than a little relieved at this point in life to have escaped the burdens and responsibilities that come to those who do shoulder considerable power. In my work life, I've been largely unsuccessful in securing the positions I have actively sought, but the positions that have found me, like the hunter that Daniel was playing about in the prelude, the positions that have found me because someone else thought I would be a good fit have proven to be deeply rewarding. Volunteer work that I've stumbled into has been equally satisfying, and the human relationships that have blessed me, family and friends, colleagues and neighbors, are not something you can plan for, study for, or demand. They are gifts that come to us from a generous world and from loving relationships. All you can do is nurture them once they begin to develop. Along the way, I've learned that each of us has less control over our fate than prevailing worldviews would have us believe. Discovering that John Lennon was correct when he asserted that life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans. In his book, Man's Search for Meaning, the noted psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, whose life was completely derailed and whose career was built upon what happened, Viktor Frankl, he advised, don't aim at success. The more you aim at it and make it a target, the more you're going to miss it. For success, like happiness, cannot be pursued. It must ensue. And it only does so as the unintended side effect of one's personal dedication to a cause greater than oneself, or as the byproduct of one's surrender to a person other than oneself. Happiness must happen. And the same holds true for success. You have to let it happen by not caring about it. We need to encourage our children to care less about success than about developing their personal character, their sense of worth and dignity, their commitment to something that is greater than themselves, that gives them a sense of purpose and meaning in life. We do well to let our lives unfold, however much or little time we may have, allowing life itself to shape what we mean rather than presuming to tell life what it means. If I were starting over, I would forego the hubris of setting any goals for myself. I'd toss my day timer. I'd stop planning so zealously and just, live. I would have started young by answering the question, what do you want to be when you grow up, by saying, whatever. Instead of planning my future and being overly confident in my sense of vocation, I would have just let it unfold, pursuing what interested me while cultivating intangible values, the values that makes life matter. As it turns out, I've done both, but it happened more by accident than design. And it has proven to be extraordinary, even though it looks nothing like what I imagined. Absolutely nothing like it. Over 4 decades, the American humorist Garrison Keillor wove stories about the fictional town of Lake Wobegon, where all the women are strong, all the men are good-looking, and all the children are above average. Aiming to be above average is an easier target than striving for extraordinary lives. And being naturally lazy, I would have welcomed the lower benchmark at an earlier point in my life. I'd like to imagine that those who grow up in the world's Lake Wobegons are likely happier and healthier than those who are forced into exclusive preschool programs for the gifted children of exclusive parents, where they may be indoctrinated into believing in their own exceptionalism. One of my greatest blessings in life was marrying someone who got this message while she was still young. There was a beatitude that hung on the wall of her house when I began dating her. I was 16, she was older. The beatitude showed a puppy lying in the grass with his eyes staring out with a soft, silken gaze. And at the bottom it read, "Blessed are those who expect nothing, for they shall not be disappointed." And that's pretty much Cindy's approach to life. She meets life on its terms, makes few demands of her own, and savors everything that comes her way. Oh, I do grouse and complain about rolling out of bed early on cottage mornings to go and watch the sunrise. But she gets more out of watching the sunrise than I get out of watching my investment portfolio, or preparing a sermon, or receiving an award. She understands the marvels of the natural world. She understands the marvel of being alive at all. And because her expectations are low, something that stood me in good stead when I asked, "Would you marry me?" the 17th time, because of this, she cherishes and savors life. Last spring, having not been invited to deliver a commencement speech anywhere, you thought I was going to say me, but I'm not. No, Garrison Keillor, having not been invited to deliver a commencement speech, penned a short essay describing the message he would have sought to convey to some graduating class if he had been given the opportunity to do so. I wish he'd have delivered the convocation address at my university. I would have told the class of 2023 to be wary of the advice of commencement speakers, he said, to aim high and be the best you can be, which has led many people to spend a pile of dough on a fancy college degree who could have gotten a more useful education by driving a cab in New York for a few years. My college education, he continued, taught me how to write intelligently about books I never read, a talent that leads in the wrong direction. I wish that instead I had interviewed my parents and written their life story. Knowing where you come from is a good thing before you start out to achieve greatness. Someday you'll wish you had done this, so why not do it now? Drive a cab by day, write family history at night. I guarantee that inspiration will strike. As it happens, I dabble in family history a lot, both my own and others, as well as local history and the history of ethnic groups and rather obscure social movements. If it's not marketable, I'm happy to study it. Tip O'Neill, a former Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, is often remembered for having said that all politics is local, although he wasn't actually the first person to make this observation. He just gets the credit. And I would extend it to say that the very lives we live are local. We live in the company of small groups, the family and friends, colleagues and neighbors I mentioned earlier. And the more famous we are, the larger the group of people who think they know us, but hardly know us at all. The wealthier we are, the more dependent we become on the labors of others. And the more powerful we are, the less we directly influence those beyond our own inner circles. It is possible to have fame, wealth, and power, yet still be profoundly alienated from the world, its people, and the very source of our being. I prefer to live close to my family and friends, even the difficult ones, because it is they who know me best. We live our lives locally, as do those whose lives are projected onto the world stage. Their fame and power are fleeting. From the figure to be, or a charlatan, ways sought to teach us. I've never been much interested in the lives of the rich and famous, which makes my own childhood ambition something I'm glad to have outgrown. Celebrity is not the same as character. Money and possessions should never be confused with wealth, and the exercise of power can be exhausting. From age to age, monuments crumble, statues are toppled, but the generations of humankind carry forward the lives and influence of everyday people. I often find myself wondering about the ancestors I know by name, about whom I know a few things related to the ordinary lives they led. And I marvel about what I imagine their skills to have been. Because they're my ancestors, I hold them in reverence, the kind of reverence I feel called to have for all the ordinary people who surround me as neighbors. My paternal grandfather was a milkman for Standard Dairies. My grandmother sold shoes at Eaton's. My maternal grandfather was a stationary engineer at Canada Cement. My other grandmother sold candy, also at Eaton's. They were urban workers with humble homes, descended from long lines of farmers and fishers, carpenters and housekeepers, brewers and weavers, with the occasional artist or teacher, minister or minor official thrown in to provide an added ounce of pride for a generation or two. I even have a reputed sorcerer who moonlighted as a bootlegger, or maybe it was the other way around, but I like to think that we were sort of in the same field of spiritual development. They all had talents that I will never know, let alone hope to master. Yet all of them are more important to me than anyone who's ever lived at 24 Sussex Drive or in the White House. Anyone who's appeared on the television or the silver screen or in the pages of the newspaper. I grow bored reading about the over-documented lives of celebrities, but I'm fascinated by the snippets I've discovered about my own ancestors or the people in my neighborhood, not to mention the individuals who have gathered together in this congregation for several generations now. We are a fascinating bunch. Read People magazine if you will. I'm content to read the old minutes of this congregation's Women's Alliance, or listen to you tell me about the people and places you have known and loved. That's news. Wealth, fame, and power can be addictive, even idolatrous if we pursue them. And once hooked, the pursuit of these things is insatiable. But we don't need them to lead extraordinary lives, for the extraordinary is embedded in the ordinary. It was on display during the church picnic 2 weeks ago. It's on display in the eyes of a child. It's on display in the songs we sing together and the stories we like to tell. Like naturalist John Burroughs, I have learned that one may live a happy and not altogether useless life on cheap and easy terms, that the essential things are always near at hand, that one's own doors open upon the wealth of heaven and earth, and that all things are ready to serve and cheer one. We will see that we are surrounded by the marvelous if we stop trying to control life and simply let it unfold. Our lives may be small, yet invaluable, humble, yet abundant, challenging, yet joyful. The extraordinary will come to us if we have the patience and the bravery to wait for it. And so do not ask your children to strive for extraordinary lives. Help them instead to find the wonder and the marvel of an ordinary life, and make the ordinary come alive for them. The extraordinary will take care of itself. Please join in the closing hymn, number 1052, The Oneness of Everything, in the Teal hymnal.